Hi, everybody. I'm so sorry first that we are about 14 minutes late. We had technical difficulties, but we are here. I am so very excited that all of you have tuned in. I'm very excited that I have this wonderful panel with me. I never thought that we would be sitting here talking about BBI with such a diverse and young, I would dare say, group of people. So I will ask them to introduce themselves.
Start with
Wanjiro.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Wanjiro Nguhe. I am a lawyer, a writer, an Afro-political feminist, and the founder of Africa Mwenzangu. At Africa Mwenzangu, we usually hold political conversations about politics and how they affect our lives, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Carol.
Karibu sana. Wanjiro is not a stranger to Msingi Talks. She was part of the conversation we had last week on Sunday, and we were talking about the church and Trump, and yeah, it was a good conversation. If you've not had an opportunity to listen to it, please go back to the Msingi Trust page, and I promise you will enjoy it. Silantoi.
All right, so my name is Susan Silantoi. I am a public policy analyst. You may remember, or you may not, I've been actively involved in politics. In 2017, I vied for the Nairobi senatorial seat. Yeah, and that's me. I'm really looking forward to having this conversation because I think it's very important for us to really understand what is going on. I think this is necessary to know and to figure out what we can do. So I'm very excited to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Silantoi. And David, and today happens to be International Men's Day. So happy Men's Day to you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and yeah, introduce yourself, tafadhali.
Yeah, so thank you for the wishes for the Men's Day, although we are the cause of all the problems in this life. Yeah, my name is David Mutai. Home is Bomet. I'm a pro-devolutionist, as I said before, and I've been very interested in the journey that Kenya has taken over the years in its constitutional making. So right from the first constitution of Kenya 2010 to the present clamor for a new constitution. So you'd say I'm a student of constitutionalism, and I commentate a lot on what is going on in the country. I support good governance in Africa, and currently I'm based in the UK. But asante sana, I'd be most honored. I'm most honored to be with you today.
Thank you, Mutai. And my name is Carol Nganga. I would call myself, it's always so hard to introduce myself because I think I can't say like everyone here I'm in devolution or a public policy or like a title, but I think of myself as a public theologian to understand how faith, justice, advocacy, how all that comes together. And also I ran and founded Msingi Trust in 2017. We have been in existence for 3 years now, and I will run a video to share with people who do not know who Msingi is. Here is a video that will explain to you who we are. And wait, this video always disappears. I had queued it and it is not here. So I can't find it right now, but Msingi is a trust that makes the connections between faith, social justice, and advocacy. And we do that mainly with making connections, creating conversations, and creating content that makes especially community leaders and to come together and connect and deliberate on matters, faith, justice, advocacy, and what that has to do with each other. So to begin us off in this conversation I would like to read a speech that was given by Professor Yash Palgai. He is, I would say, the father of the Kenyan Constitution. People might say no, but I believe he is. This speech was given at the launch of the Dagoretti Social Justice Center. I will not read the whole of it, but I will read from the part where it begins with him exhorting us to defend the Constitution. So, and I know David has just told me that Prof. Yash was his student, or you'll tell us about the relation that you had. So here it is. You will notice that there are many functions that a social center must undertake. Among them, you must teach your members the importance of the Constitution in order to achieve their numerous rights and solidarity with others. Without these, you will be denied by the government and others the decent life that you're entitled to, and to which now you must help others as well. You're starting your social center at a critical moment when many human and political rights may be denied to you by some key politicians who are obliged to ensure these rights, to you. The most critical factor which has plagued this nation is less the coronavirus as the horrible threat of BBI, Building Bridges Initiative. Its promoters consider that they would rather submit your lives to BBI than to the virus. Indeed, in the short time they have adopted the BBI, more Kenyans have either died or we soon die listening to the values of the BBI, which have been promoted in most of the country. Your first priority now seems to me to understand something about the BBI and its history. A year or more ago, Uhuru and Raila, current creators and promoters of BBI, invited me to explain to them how to stop several violations of the Constitution. I told them that it was as easy as Uhuru as president had ample police and other resources to find those who disobey the Constitution and the law and to punish them. But for some reason, they decided not to take my advice. Instead, their strategy, for which I was invited for only one meeting, was to make fundamental changes to the Constitution, which now we call BBI. By use of a huge sum of money paid by citizens, but without consulting them. They embarked on a major project to make fundamental changes to the Constitution. At this stage, citizens were not consulted, but only some quote-unquote experts of their own choice. Citizens were only confronted with their proposal recently. They went round the country to publicize the changes to be made to the Constitution. It is important that you study the changes they are going to make very soon, and even now, together with other social centers, fight against their adopting the new system. Civil society on the whole has not opposed the proposal until some statements recently, but no real action. I hope you will, together with other social centers after today, plan your action. The whole project is planned by and is for the benefit of and for 5 largest tribes. The most important factor will be to ensure that their leaders obtain control of the state. They hope to avoid the tense conflict among themselves that they have faced in the past. when many of their supporters were killed and buildings burned. This is, of course, in itself sensible, but for the country, the new proposals are designed to ensure the permanent rule of these 5 tribes. Members of each tribe will be the members of the executive of the state by creating 5 critical posts of government, including of both the president and the prime minister in the executive and the legislature. It does not seem to make any sense, and no doubt to create great resentment among other communities. In addition, there will be many other changes to be made to the law, like weakening of the judiciary. So the government has few restrictions, and the changes of devolution, which again make little sense. There are major changes to the political, legal, and social systems, which directly or indirectly will undermine the constitution. There will be other changes which will weaken civil society. Unfortunately, civil society has not organized to fight off these changes, except for some criticisms lately. So this is a challenge to you, as you join the movement of justice. I would propose that Happy, who is the Social Justice Center's convener, and other leaders to meet immediately to consider how they can prevent the implementation of the BBI. If all the members of social justice were able together to attack the changes proposed and collaborated with other civil societies, we may be able to prevent some of the selfish amendments that the 5 tribes are on the verge of adoption. If they succeed, it would be hard to look upon Kenya as a national state. I would strongly recommend that civil society leaders convene a major meeting with all other civil society leaders to express their criticism of the BBI. Surprisingly, there has not been any surprisingly, there has not any joint major gathering to question BBI. Let us now give it publicly throughout the country. This is our only hope. It's quite a lengthy read, but I feel it's so important for us to begin our conversation with this. I want to hear responses from Silanto. What comes to mind when you hear Yash speaking about this? Your initial reactions to that speech?
First of all, I've not been able to look at the speech before, but just like the portion that you read is very disheartening. Like it's very heartbreaking in terms of, you know, the effort that people put to get to the new constitution, you know, all the way from, you know, when they were trying to repeal Section 2A in 1992 to the 2005 referendum to 2010. I mean, it was a lot of effort for just a few people to come and, you know, bulldoze some sort of proposals that they would like. So it's definitely disheartening, but also I think it's a call to probably civil society, or, you know, just people in general, to try our best to have more people understand what the BBI is talking about, to go into the details of what exactly does this mean, how exactly will it affect you, so that, you know, people can make an informed choice if indeed it does go into a referendum. So I think what he's talking about is, he paints a very grim picture, which is quite sad. However, like, I think it's an opportunity to grasp this sort of conversation that we're being forced to have, and, you know, just help us understand what it's talking about. I think it's actually like, you know, when you listen to conversations about the BBI, it's always like, have you read the document? You know, it's like super forceful about, you know, like, you're the one who is ignorant, and and it's like, it's honestly, it's a bit unrealistic to expect everybody to read that whole document and understand exactly what it's saying. So I think it's a call for us to have more conversations, in fact, and be more open about um, the implications, so that people can make informed choices. So yeah, so that's what I think about it.
Asante Silantoi. Mutai? You're on mute. Please unmute.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I think I agree with what Silantoi has said. There's so much pressure for everybody to read the document called the BBI. And normally you're asked, don't stop commenting until you have read it. And normally those who are saying stop commenting until you read it will always be the person who is supporting the other side of the debate. Okay? If you say you support their side and they say, good, you have read it. You see? So we have divided the country already. And the majority of the Kenyan people do not understand what BBI is. And we actually, even us who've read it, do not understand what it means. Because if you dissect the document, there are two parts of it. There's the main part of it, which is actually going to be the main bone of contention, is the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020. So you see, the BBI is like the Bible with so many books. There is Nehemiah, there is Psalms, there is John, there is Matthew. So that is how BBI is. And we call it BBI like the Bible, yeah? But inside the Bible, there are books that we must read independently, individually. So I'm picking the book of Matthew. I'm picking the book called the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Act 2020. That is the one which is actually the BBI. That is what is born out of the handshake between the president and the former prime minister. That is the one which actually tears down into what Yash Balgai worked hard so hard to come up with. The new Constitution of Kenya that we have, which is still new, the 2010 one, is still one of the best documents in Africa and actually globally. It provides what we have not implemented half of. The issue of the gender equality, the issue of youth, the issues around integrity, devolution, which is a mother of all, which has worked so well in spite of the teething challenges. That constitution was one of the best. So that Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020 is what actually amends the Constitution of Kenya 2010. So when somebody says BBI, it's good to say, okay, let's talk about that bit which touches on the Constitution. The rest of it, which is the second part of the BBI, doesn't touch on the Constitution. It is like you supply something to a county, and you're not paid on time. Now they're coming up with a bill to say you must be paid on time, which is really a common sense thing, which doesn't need a referendum. Okay, so the rest of the good part of the BBI, there's some good parts and there's some bad parts. So all the good part of the BBI does not need a referendum. And you'll find them, it's a list of the other books of John, Revelations, Genesis. The other books of the BBI are very good. We support them fully. We'll have a problem with one part of BBI, the one that touches on the Constitution. That's all I can say for now.
Asante. Wanjiro, remarks on the speech, Yash's speech, and any comments from what you've heard your co-panelists saying?
All right. So number one, I agree with what Yash. At this time, we need to focus on the people, and we need to focus on what is happening with the COVID, with what is happening with the doctors. We have county offices closing down because of COVID. We have doctors dying because they don't have enough PPEs. And instead of, catering for the people, we are here busy talking about a BBI and a this and a that. And I also support the hashtag that is saying, BBI is your COVID. And so I agree with what Yash is saying. This is not the moment to, to come and start interfering with the lives of the people and to put, people at risk with a document that we really don't need when we have a constitution that we need to amend. And I also agree with what David has said about the only part of the BBI that we have a problem with is the part where you're suggesting that we amend this constitution. We don't need to amend this constitution. We don't need to create more seats, the prime minister seats and all these other things, because we have devolution. Devolution already caters for the war and all these things, because it was created, to try and minimize the effects of a post-election violence. So I believe in the spirit of devolution, and I think that was the point of the constitution. With what David has said, we don't need this. We don't need this BBI. We need to focus on people, and we need to focus on making sure that people don't die from COVID, and that doctors have what they need, and that money is used appropriately. We need to focus on the people who we are purporting to care about. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Thank you. So how did this happen? Silanso, I've been spending most of yesterday and today going through your YouTube channel, and I was like, this is what school should be like. You're teaching us the basics of BBI. And so I'll ask you to give us a brief history of constitutional reform and how did we get here? Like, this will, I know we can start from 1950,
Yeah.
but maybe in 2 minutes, how did we get here? And
Okay.
anyway, then some other people can join in if there is
Yeah.
something else to add. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think David would be like really good to answer this. But I'll just summarize like based on what I was talking about in that video. Just understanding like, okay, so how did you get here? From the 2010 constitution. So we went to a referendum, we got a new constitution in 2010. Then after that, we started implementing it in 2013, with the coming of devolution, just with all the changes of the new constitution. So that's where we were at for a bit. So we went to elections in 2013, we went to elections in 2017. If you remember, 2017 was like a crazy election year. We had a prolonged election period. There was, people who were sworn in as people's presidents, other people, were deported. Like there was so much drama going on. So then we got a handshake on March 8th, 2018. The two, Uhuru and Raila, shook hands, and some things were born out of the handshake, and one of those things is the BBI. So the president said that, I think we have a problem as a country. And he recommended that, let's appoint a task force, let this task force go around the country, collecting views and, come up with what is wrong with Kenya. And then, so this, they did that. They've written this in the documents that was released in 2019, October. Yeah. They've written how they went about it and who they collected this information from, and then they came up with a list of 9 issues that they say Kenya ails from. And these issues are, just to name a few: national ethos, devolution, corruption, negative ethnicity, divisive elections, and others. So then they told us, okay, we've come up with this. These are the problems. So we want you guys to discuss and come up with the solutions. And then, that document was heavy on, the problems, and it was limited on the recommendations. So now it was upon us to have a national conversation, which, by the way, that document did not state how this is supposed to be done. Like, how are we supposed to go about this? How is the national conversation supposed to be conducted? It wasn't really stated. Anyway, so again, we had a national conversation. They went around again collecting views, and then in October 2020, last month, is when they came up now with the final draft, which gives us recommendations of how to deal with the 9 issues that they had discovered in the other document. So I think that's how we got here. So it was mainly from an election period, and then a process of conversations that are said to be had over a period of time, and then now we have a document that is here. And so this document should be presented in Parliament. I think they'll collect signatures first. It will be presented in Parliament, and it will also be presented in the county assemblies. And for it to go into a referendum, I think 2/3 of the county assemblies should approve, as well as Parliament. So that's where we're at.
Asante Islanto, you've taken us from 2010 to now. David, are you able to take us up to 2010, the processes before that gave us the constitution?
Okay. Thank you so much, Silantoi, for that. I think you've actually captured it so well. I can't add anything to that. I can only go back a bit, reverse to independence, yeah, to see, so that we can actually see why we started changing, why we got into the habit of changing the constitution, why the addiction to change the constitution every period before an election. You remember well, you don't remember, you've read in history about our independence. We had an independence whereby Kenya was supposed to be a devolved system of government initially in Lancaster. That never happened. We moved into a capitalist system of government whereby we had the Kenya that you saw as you're growing up, a very powerful president. We had what do you say? Not a supreme president, but an imperial president. And I think to bring Kenya into perspective, I'll talk about the country where I am now. You see, we got independence from the British, yeah? And England, they have the Queen, they have the Prime Minister, we have a Parliament, we have the House of Lords. Now, and the House of Commons, of course, that's what I say called the Parliament. Now, what we took as a country, we took the seat of the president to be both that of the prime minister, who is the head of government, and to be the queen as well. That is why in Kenya we revere the president so much, and we've given him so much powers, because he's taken the powers of the Queen of England and the powers of the prime minister. You see, that is why during the time of Jomo Kenyatta, the time of Moi, the president had the power to annex land in any part of the country and give it to his friends and cronies. That is why we came up eventually with the commission that was to review the historical injustice. It's because of the mistake we did in the beginning. So that is where we went wrong as a country. We can't be blamed anyway because we were ushered into independence. We never knew how to drive this car called Kenya. So we could only look upon our former masters and say, okay, how are you driving your car? They said, oh, we've got a queen and a prime minister. We said, no, okay, fine. We'll just put them into one building and throw them in the State House. So we had this president who the first thing he did in independence was to annex all land that belonged to the white settlers to himself. You know, charity begins at home. That is why if you look at the landscape of Kenya, you'll be shocked. A few people own the rest of the country. You know, it's shocking. And you know, there's a quote I attributed to Obama. It says, the arc of the moral universe is carved, but bends towards justice. Eventually things will be balanced out. So it's just a matter of time. So leaving the history part, the first president left and handed over the mantle, the rungu, from the whiskey to rungu, to another president who was a queen and the prime minister. He continued doing the same. You know, he didn't know any different. He was just following what he was left with. So in, was it in the mid 80s, Kenyans thought, okay, we need to change what is happening now. But first of all, we need to get rid of this single party system. So we got rid of the single party system by repealing section 2A of the constitution. Then we had multi-party system of government. People were now able to speak freely of the problems that the country was facing. And those who spoke so freely were chased out of the country. You know, some were put in prison, some were killed, some had to go to exile. Eventually, the Moi era ended, and it ended with something very good. the changing of the constitution. Kenyans said, okay, fine, we got independence and we didn't start well. We need to start Kenya afresh. So we had the new Kenya with Yash Balgai coming in and helping to guide us through the making of the constitution. I've just gone very fast to now where we are. We have the 2010 constitution based on the problems we had with the first Kenya, where we had a supreme imperial president, and we said, no, we don't want that. Let's have a more fairer Kenya. The new constitution of Kenya 2010 said, okay, because one powerful leader can be very dangerous, what can we do? Let's divide the country. So there was a big debate in Nakuru on how to divide Kenya into manageable portions, what we call now counties. So we had, eventually, after the debate, we had 47 counties. And we said, fine, with these counties, the functions that they will take must be followed by resources. We gave them money, the 15%, the famous 15%. So counties have received 15% of national revenue, and they have done very well, okay? We know some governors have been mismanaging funds here and there, but so far so good. We've managed to see regions getting new hospitals, new roads being built up, and employment going up in the regions of the country. Now, that is the constitution we have. Then all of a sudden we said, in between 2013 and 2017, we wanted to change the constitution with the Pesa Mashinani. Remember that? The Mashinani campaign. So we had the Mashinani campaign to try and get more resources to the counties. It never happened. With this BBI, we've been told that there'll be more money to the counties. So that is a debate. We'll talk about that later on in the discussion, about that 15% moving to 35%. But now I've moved us all to think about Kenya from the beginning to where we are. We are now talking about changing that wonderful new Kenya into the Kenya of 1963. We are giving the presidency the powers that we are trying to run away from. Think about this, guys. You have a president who elects a prime minister, a deputy prime minister, and another deputy prime minister, and his vice president, no longer the deputy, just a vice president, and he appoints entire cabinet without any vetting. You know, he just chooses his cronies. And now the same president can fire all of them at will. Okay. Second thing, with the issue that you've been hearing a lot on the media, the issue of the ombudsman being under the control of the executive. That's another thing. He also has a string on the judiciary. And then you've heard about the CS internal security being being the boss of the policing system. So he controls the police as well. So we are back to square one. That is why there's a big debate, and I'm so happy that we're having this discussion now. So those are the issues which I hope will come out as we discuss this evening. Thank you.
Wow, Yani, that is the most concise from Silantoi and Mutai. You've helped us to map from the 50s up to now. Wanjiru, what do you hear when you hear this history? What are you hearing?
Okay, even before I talk about what I'm hearing, I just want to comment on the relationship between the Odinga family and the Kenyatta family. We know that there's a historic, like a sort of animosity between those two families in the time of the first president, Jomo Kenyatta and Odinga Oginga, who is Raila's father. And then now the same now has played out in our time, where we have now like something going on between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. And I just want to say that, I mean, in my mind, when I think about the handshake agreement, it's like they're trying to make this agreement between them about the nation when it's really about two families. I mean, would love for them to have their cookout and, sort their differences, eat ambuzi together or whatever, without involving the rest of the country. So when I hear we're moving together as a nation, winner takes all, loser takes all, but who is really winning and who is really losing? Because at the end of the day, if I was broke, before an election, I'm still going to be broke after the election. So I'm not really winning anything. It's just there are a few people who are winning at this thing. So also when I listen to what David Mutai is talking about, where we were coming from and what we were trying to emulate and now where we are, and we're trying to imagine this thing. And I think that the Constitution of Kenya 2010 allows us to imagine a country that works for us at the very least. Because if you look at Article 1.1, where it says all sovereign power belongs to the people and shall be exercised in accordance with this constitution. And the thing that I love about this constitution is the very many avenues for public participation, which is an area that I love to do, to do a lot of work in. And you're trying to take that away from us, and you're trying to, have that power in someone else's hand. Well, yet the power is with the people. We, the people, are the ones, with the power. So what I will comment about the history is, let's not make a family, like family problems become national problems, because that's not, like, we are moving forward. We're not moving backwards. If you have anything to sort and anything to settle, you just do it in your family meetings, call each other out on barbecues and solve that without involving the rest of the country. I think so.
Allow me to add on to that very powerful and concise contribution. I'm saying, is that okay?
Yes, you can. Yes.
That's fine. So that was, I mean, Wanjiru has actually nailed it on the head. I gave an example the other day about the way we can compare Kenya to a mafia family, a mafia country, where you've got two lords fighting, two mafia kingpins fighting. And the only thing they have to do for there to be peace is that they come up with an MOU, so that there can be peace in the country. That is what we have been reduced to as a country. I believe that the handshake was an MOU between two families. I really agree with what Wanjiru said. It was an MOU between two families to come up with peace. If you see what is happening in Kenya now, we've got two presidents, literally. We've got the president of the Republic of Kenya, and we've got the people's president. And the sad part is that we actually validated the second swearing in by welcoming the person who swore himself in into power. He calls cabinet meetings. He chairs. He gets delegations. So and his people, the people who support him, see him as a co-president. If we have to change anything in this country, it is that. So I agree with what Wanjiru said, that an MOU between two families is not an MOU between the people of Kenya. So let's not confuse MOU, which is a BBI is an MOU, and the Constitution of Kenya. The Constitution has to be a bottom-up creation by the people, for the people, and of the people. But what we have is that two families have come together, shook hands, and said, now you guys, come on, join us. And we have a problem also because our people are lovely. Kenyans are amazing people. They support their leaders, they follow their leaders. If they say, let's jump to the Indian Ocean, they will follow and they will jump and they will die. They have refused, our people have refused to actually interrogate the document. The power is with the people. 50 million Kenyans have got more than two people. If everybody came up, I like what Yash Balgai said, that sadly enough, the civil society have kept quiet. Sadly enough, the people who had the voice have kept quiet. They're just watching the country go down the slippery slope because whatever happens, if, for example, God forbid, that the BBI passes, and the people who've been driving the BBI do not actually get into power. Think about that. Will there be peace? And also the issue of winner takes it all. Somebody said the other day that Magufuli Pombe has won the elections and he's taken everything, and that is democracy. Joe Biden has won the US elections and he took everything, that is democracy. Obama took everything, that was democracy. Kibaki did, that was democracy. So we need to understand that we are either a democratic country or we are a dictatorship. We are a democratic country, we cannot reinvent the wheel. In democracy, the winner takes it all. And just to add this before I hand over to you, we need to think of one thing as a country, as we move forward. If we want really to have a functional democracy in the country, we should be empowering the opposition. If anything, what we should be fighting for now is, let's say the leader of opposition will take his seat. He can get the same salary as the president. We don't care. He can have his own cabinet with salaries. We don't care. We just want a functioning government, a functioning opposition, and a functioning sitting government. Because what normally happens is that if the government falters and falls, the opposition should be able to take over and lead the country. Okay? So they are our insurance that we are okay. If this side fails, the other side is there. So we need to empower the opposition in this country and not come up with what we are trying to do now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, David. Silantoa, you said that there were the 9 issues, and I think you listed a few that the main changes that the BBI is recommending. Is it possible to repeat that, and maybe for people who are not there, so that we can list what, and all of us can add to it the changes that the BBI is recommending? What is it?
Okay, so I'll go back to like the 9 core challenges that they presented in the first report. So they talked about lack of national ethos, and that is particularly interesting to me, just because what is that like, and do people care anyway? So there's that, and then there's rights and responsibilities of citizenship. There's ethnic antagonism and competition. They put this as a separate point from divisive elections, which I'm not sure is the same. Like, I'm not sure that's the case, but that is how it was presented. And then we have an issue with inclusivity. We have an issue with shared prosperity. We have an issue with corruption. We have an issue with devolution, and we have an issue with safety and security. So those are the 9 issues that were presented first, so that it can ignite a national conversation, so that we can propose solutions for the same. So, in terms of covering issues to do with citizenship and national ethos, they listed some recommendations of what needs to be changed in the part of the Constitution that talks about being a citizen. And they included a section to just talk about like what are our national values. I don't know, do you care? I think it's just interesting to me. And then obviously they came up with 9 changes for the Constitution, and then some more. In total, there are about 58 recommendations. 9 of them need constitutional amendment. 9 of them they state need constitutional amendments, but some of them actually don't. So obviously the major changes would include definitely changing the structure of the executive and having the prime minister, and then also having the deputy prime ministers, changing the name of the deputy president to be vice president. They also changed the structure of parliament and just remodeling it to have government back into the house. So meaning that the prime minister would he would be the leader of government business within the National Assembly. And then there would be a leader of opposition who would be picked from the runner-up of the presidential election. Then they've also suggested that cabinet ministers could be picked from parliament as well, so they could sit in parliament like what we used to have before. So those are the main changes for the executive and the legislature. They've also talked about having an ombudsman, which I actually found interesting, that currently we do have a judicial ombudsman, and that is the deputy CJ. I forgot her name. What's her name?
Her face is here. What's her name?
Yes, Mwilu. I think her name is Mwilu.
Yes.
Yeah. So she's the current ombudsman. It's just that it's not institutionalized in any sort of law. However, like the interesting thing, I think it's in the Uraia document, it was suggested that that should just be institutionalized through the Judicial Service Act. So it doesn't really have to be a constitutional amendment to have the ombudsman there. And at the same time, having an ombudsman is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the manner of appointments that can compromise, as what David was talking about in terms of having the hand of the presidency within the judiciary. If you're going to have an ombudsman who's appointed by the president, approved by parliament, then it will definitely be, a bit compromising in that sense. Yeah, and then I'll just talk about the last thing about devolution, and then probably someone else can take over. So we'll talk about devolution in terms of they would like to increase the allocation to 35%, which is from the 15% that we currently have, which is a good thing. However, the constitution now doesn't limit us from having more than 15%. It talks about having at least 15%. So if they really wanted to give devolution more, they could without any constitutional amendments. The other thing also was about having the ward development fund. And I thought that was an interesting one. So each, I think MCA would have about a budget of about 20 million a year. In a sense, having a ward development fund would be great. It could have its challenges in terms of having very many parallel funding sources. You could lose some of the responsibilities in the middle. However, we don't need to have a constitutional amendment to have a ward development fund, because even the CDF was introduced in the year 2003, and there was no referendum for that. So it's just interesting. Like, most of the suggestions can be good, could be coming from a good place, I guess. They don't necessarily, some of them don't necessarily require a referendum, and the ones that do, we will just ask ourselves, is this necessary? Does it affect me in a good way? Yeah, so those are just a few that I picked out because I thought would have the most impact. I guess someone else can continue with the rest.
I'd like to pin that question, and I'd like to come to Wanjiru and ask, because a lot of civil society are saying that the more you engage with the BBI process, the more you're invalidating an unconstitutional process. From a legal perspective, was the process legal? Was it constitutional? And what about the selective consultative forums? Because I want to know from the four of you who are here, were you invited into a space and told, come, let's talk about BBI? Who was chosen? How are they chosen? Is this legal? And then also taking the mirror back to civil society, is it really fair? Is it really fair to say that because it wasn't, we are invalidating an quote unquote illegal process, that then we won't engage? Is that a fair observation? Wanjiru.
All right. So I was okay. Thank you for that question. I was fortunate. I don't know if it's fortunate or I don't know, to be invited to attend one of those meetings, that were held in Kiambu, and I was just invited because, like, the office that was planning it knew me, and so I was invited to attend one of those. And of course, there was per diem, And the thing about that process, it was very interesting because everyone had about, so what is the problem and how would you like the problem solved? And that was what they considered public participation, but it was very selected. There were like a select, it was not like, here is the BBI committee and everyone who wants to come can come and listen and give their opinion. So there was a bit of selectiveness there, which, that's not how public participation works. Public participation is supposed to be, there's a meeting, the meeting is announced, and there are certain requirements for the meeting to be, it has to be announced in a local paper. It has to be announced in the manner that it's going to reach the largest number of people. But now when you send someone a WhatsApp and tell them, are you available for this? That's not how it's supposed to go. That's not how you call people for a public participation meeting. And also the idea of telling people you have 5 minutes to talk about, your problem and how you want it solved. We've not, like, you can't do that and call that a public participation. The point is to call people, hear them, and then go back, discuss, and then come back and tell them, this is what you told us. Is this what you, because sometimes we don't know what we want. We are not all lawyers. We don't all understand how government processes work. So yes, there's that. And also there's something that I wanted to mention about the Constitution. It's something that we learned, in my constitutional law class, and we're told that the Constitution, basically, like, the point of the Constitution is to lay down the guidelines between the governors and the people who are being governed. So if I was to read the BBI, I would focus a lot on the executive structure, because that tells us what the governors want, because that is the part that they will focus on. That is what is making them risk our lives in a time of COVID to tell us what they really want. And that is the part that, Silantwe was talking about, where now the president wants to consolidate all this power. The president wants to have a hand in the judiciary. He wants to have a hand in the parliament. He wants to make sure that, the executive is expanded to the point where his power is almost unchecked. Yeah, I don't know if I've answered your question. I think, yeah.
I think so. So would you say it was the legality of it? Would you, and also talk about the civil society and its, anyone else can join into that conversation as well. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Who'd like to go? David?
I'm unmuting myself. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, true indeed. The question is very valid. Are we dealing with a legal process? Is engaging with it invalidating an already legal process? That's a very difficult question, especially in a country whereby the executive no longer respects the constitution. They don't respect the law. How many laws have we broken so far? In fact, we may be dealing with an illegal parliament that is about to pass an illegal constitutional amendment. See, the problem, we could use a bravado, chest stamping and say, we do this, we've got the numbers. Because, the thinking behind the two handshake partners, the two brothers, is that they feel that they own the country. One says, I've got my 4 million plus. The other one says, I've got my 4 million plus. The two of us, we can conquer. It's a very dangerous step to take, but they have taken that step. They were going to collect the signatures from today, I think. For some miraculous reason, I think there was somebody may have actually told them to stop it for now. So we have a problem. The constitutionality of what is going on. The question of whether we were called in to discuss the process, no. I never took part in it, and I really would have wanted to be part of it, but I was never consulted on it. I'm sure many of my colleagues here too were never consulted on it. And those who were consulted, you've heard that you're given 5 minutes to say your and forever keep your peace. Okay. Now we have a problem here as well. There's a belief that whatever you said on those sittings, the town hall meetings, was just part of to see that there was a public participation on the process. So it was just for the show, but they knew already what they wanted. And you've rightly said, Wanjiru, that we need to look at the structure of government. That's the main thing. BBI is about restructuring government so that somebody becomes the top dog, okay? The rest, the issues about the youth getting a council is just a story. The issue about the gender equality within the new BBI is just a story. The issue of giving counties 35%. In fact, that one is a big thing. We'll talk about that. Is another story which will never work. Because the current constitution says minimum 15%, meaning you can go up, okay? We can go to 20 and to 25 and to 30, even to 50. It's possible. Sadly enough, on that part of 35% is not possible because we spend as a country 60% on paying salaries. So if you're giving counties 35%, add the two, how much do you get? 60 plus 35?
95.
95. So the national government, after giving counties and paying the salaries, would be left with 5%. They have not paid China. Okay. They've not paid for their fuel guzzlers. They've not paid for their lifestyles. So you see, it's a lie. It will never work. But then we are believing that 35% is coming to the counties. It will never. Okay. So the constitutionality of the process is in doubt. And the danger is that somebody will go to court eventually, and the whole thing is going to come crumbling down. The sad part is that it will be after we've spent so much money in this process. The issue of the structure, again, is something which is it's actually something which may surprise everybody. The two brothers may be lying to themselves, both of them. One of them, just listen to this. One of them believes that he's going to be the president. The other one believes he's going to be the president. The two of them have their cards at the back of they have not declared who wants to be the prime minister, who wants to be the president. One believes that the other one has served 2 terms and is ready to go home, forgetting that if we have a new constitution, it will be a new fresh start. Yeah, and the one who has been turned to be still young to go home will say, hey guys, we are in a new beginning and I'm still young, I've been told. We'll have another fight, okay? And also think, can you imagine a situation, let me just mention names. Can you imagine a situation whereby we have Raila as president and appointing and being able to fire Uhuru, who is going to be the prime minister? Is it possible? I mean, if you think about it, it's really...
And actually, I honestly would want to see that.
Would you? It would be like from a governor and you're going to apply to be an MCA.
Yes.
Yeah, it cannot happen. Okay? That will not happen. So you can imagine what the thinking in their minds is that we have a change of constitution because the president does not respect presidential term limits. Okay? So we will change the constitution, and then the two of them alone, the rest of us will step back, they will fight on their own. Because none wants to be the subservient to the other. That is the danger we are putting the country into.
I've heard some pro-BBI voices saying that we cannot imagine, because we cannot imagine that the current president, because the prime minister has to vie for a parliamentary seat first, so that he goes and becomes a prime minister. So the proponent was saying, how can you imagine either, can you imagine the president vying for Nairobi County or where? Dagoretti South? Maybe he can be our MP or something. So that's the reason that they are saying, to say that this is not with him in mind, because that will be a demotion. But I'd like us to move to something, and any of you can pick this question. These 9 core challenges that we are that we are speaking about, they all sound like they can be fixed with equitable distribution of resources that don't depend on elections. It's things that, if politicians really worked for the good of the people, we would not have these problems. Post-election violence is not because of elections. I don't think so. Post-election violence is because we have hinged. Post-election violence is not because Kenyans are violent. It's because we have hinged so much on elections that it is a do or die. So if there was equitable distribution of resources, I honestly think we did not. So I feel like they're asking the wrong questions and answering it with the wrong answers. So wrong question, wrong answers, wrong everything. How do we move Kenyans into asking the right questions from this leadership? Anjiro, you look like you're ready to answer.
Okay, no, I was just agreeing with what you were saying about us having a post-election violence, because we peg a lot on our politics, and truth be told, politics really is a do or die, because if you then you will understand how politics is important and how our lives literally depend on it, because it dictates what we eat, it dictates what we can afford, it dictates where we live. I mean, it dictates even who we have sex with, it dictates so many aspects of our lives. So yes, politics is a do or die. And I also agree with you that our greatest problem in this country, in my opinion, is inequality. It's not even tribalism. I wouldn't say it's tribalism. It's not even tribalism. I would say it's camper. But if I get the perception that the reason you're prospering is because the president is your child, and so he gets to control the resources, and then he gets to give you more than us who are, so obviously there's going to be some form of animosity because of the sort of inequality. I look at my life, maybe I'd be able to afford all these things that I can see that you're affording. So yeah, so that is what I just like to say, that I agree with what you're saying, that we're not really violent, we're not tribalistic, but what we really are is like we have an equal society. Yeah.
Silantoi, Mutai?
So why do we? Okay, I think the way I would answer your question also, I have a different answer to the question you just posed. Um, I think a real or perceived unfair electoral process is a reason why there is normally post-election violence. Real or perceived electoral malpractices. Okay, so for example, if you go to 2008, 2007, 8, there was a clear, that was a real one now, a real electoral malpractice. And I'm from the school that believes that the electoral violence was not planned, it was spontaneous. People were watching on TV, they were listening on radio. Kivuitu saying, Wamenda Kukaranga, he said something towards elections being unfair. Eventually he said, he doesn't know who won. So how do you expect the public to behave? In 2017, there was a perceived or real electoral malpractice as well. There was the issue of getting a French company to do some algorithms. There was the issue of the servers, which have never been opened, you see. So, but nobody has actually, if I normally say that if Raila Odinga, for example, was sincere in transforming, in changing Kenya for good, he would have addressed the issue of electoral malpractice. How do we make our elections fairer? Trust me, Kenyans don't care who leads them, so long as it's a fair process. We don't care about the winner takes it all. Nobody complains about the winner takes it all. Everybody complains about unfair elections. Everybody complains about closed servers, algorithms, of electoral commission not knowing who won the elections. Everybody is complaining about staffed elections, rigged elections, but nobody complains about the winner takes it all. We don't have a problem with it. We love it. In fact, we love the democracy that comes with it. Because I've realized, I've worked for a politician one time, and this is what happened. After we won the elections, he employed the best people from his opponent's side. So that is what politicians do. They cripple the opponent by taking the brains from the other side. So at the end of the day, also, the side which never voted for the one who wins will get more goodies because they try and appease the other side. Presidents are human beings. They try and actually pay back by appeasing. For example, the current president is overstepping it by actually shaking the hand and bringing him in completely, the leader of the other side, instead of actually dealing with addressing the needs of the people from the other side. So the problem we have is nothing to do with the winner takes it all. It has to do with unfair electoral processes. And I hope today we'll talk about the IBC as well. The way the BBI has addressed the IBC problem, they've made the IBC look so clean. They're now the victims. The IBC now is a victim of an unfair process, which is very bad, you know. So how the conversation should be, if we are heading towards an election now, it's not about, we don't need, the emergency issue now is not unchanged constitution. The emergency issue now is the referee, the IBC. How are we going to go to a referendum next in a few months' time when we have an IBC that we already think they are not performing well? And it's not that the IBC cannot perform well. Possibly the systems that are in place make them not be able to perform well. Maybe they are coerced into doing committing malpractices, or maybe they are threatened that they will be killed, or maybe they will be killed, or maybe some were actually killed. Yeah, we know that somebody was killed. So these are issues which are really, really, really the issues that we should be talking about as a country. That should be the national conversation. How are we going to referee the referendum? Okay. How are we going to referee the elections? Instead, what we are seeing is what is making us feel more worried, because they're changing the ID system. There's a new Huduma number, which everybody believes, everybody knows they will use it to manipulate the elections, but nobody says anything. Until it happens, then we fight again. Over to you.
Slantoy, anything to add?
I think in addition to what David has said, and also just to make reference to what Wanjiru also talked about in terms of how politics affects everything, I think I'll speak on. So I'm from Samburu. That's where I come from. And up to today, there's still no tarmac road that goes to the main town in Samburu. And if you go to different parts of the country, they're obviously very marginalized, and so in some areas, like, you know, some people feel more entitled to the resources of the country because of their population, as opposed to others, or, you know, as they probably feel more entitled because they assume that they're the economic powerhouse or whatever. And therefore, this would lead to some, you know, some animosity in a sense that, you know, some people would feel they need to not be part of this country because it doesn't make sense for them. Like people from the coast, who have always been like Pwani, si Kenya. Some people who probably are from parts of Western Kenya would feel, okay, we also don't have, we've also been neglected. Some people even within Central would be like, yeah, you know, I mean, we could be perceived to be receiving this number of resources, but still, even for us, it still doesn't work like that. And so I think you do bring out a good point about equal distribution of resources, and that is, you know, something that is still a very, very big challenge. Just speaking as someone from a marginalized region in the country, and most of us really, I mean, like people from these regions really appreciate devolution, because for the first time in towns you would have street lights, you know, basic things like those because of devolution. And you know, so it's just the whole thing of just managing the resources better to a point where, you know, it doesn't really matter who is in government. It's just about, you know, structures and systems that have been set up to equally cater to everybody. And then this whole issue of winner takes all probably won't be an issue. I mean, because we're not sure if it's an issue now, but for real, it won't be an issue at the time. So yeah, so it's just the whole thing of ensuring that we have better structures, sustainable structures that are able to withstand any sort of regime. Yeah, so yeah, just that.
Oh, wow. So there's so much, there's a lot. And thank you. I want to shout out Manka, who's doing our social media for us. And there's questions from the guys who are watching that we'll come to as we will come to them. There's so today I was really torn because I have wanted, my heart is pained because of the current status of the country, especially in regards to COVID. I was almost thinking maybe today's conversation should be about COVID and the doctors and the deaths and how it seems now that MPs are dying, that it becomes, it's now more serious because MPs are dying. So whether we like it or not, COVID is a wild card. But the fun, quote unquote, thing is there's no cash to support citizens and businesses to stay afloat, but there's money for BBI. Then there's also, there's 14 billion. Then IEBC says 2 billion, whatever amount, there's money for BBI, but there's no money for COVID. And I'm even looking at some of the conversations that the CSs, both of education and health, are proclaiming about next year. It's like, we know next year we might not have half the country, yet we are proclaiming about, there was an April deadline of the BBI, and where we've been told we must all have read, yet there are no one that we must all read is I find it very condescending. That, have you read? I don't know how to read. It is in English. Majority of this country does not speak English, so it is elitist. It's an elitist question. Then it's an expensive process, yet hospitals are full. So is there a way that budgets can be transferred? Because please educate us. Can budgets be transferred from BBI to health? Because there is 14 billion. There's money to go around in this country. David.
Yes.
Why is there 14 billion for?
I feel you. I feel everybody when you talk about COVID.
Yeah.
Let me just explain that where I am now. We had a season in April where we are losing close to 1,000 people per day. That's a sobering amount. That is a number that should really worry all of us. So when you hear the leadership still pressing on to BBI, you're right by saying that, you're correct by saying that we should actually be talking about COVID, not BBI. But what we're actually trying to do is to say, let's stop and think, it's not an emergency that we don't have a change in the constitution. COVID, it's a COVID moment and not a constitutional moment. The president was wrong. This is not a COVID moment. It's not a constitutional moment. It's a COVID moment. The number of people who've died, just to give a few, we only hear the ones who are the who and who in society. We had this week that 12 head teachers have died of COVID. This week we've had that 10 doctors died in November alone of COVID. I have a brother who works for Nakuru County, and he told me that they just lost an MCA, and that was a second. And that nearly half the assembly is actually recuperating or admitted in hospital because of COVID. There are millions, thousands of Kenyans, millions actually, who could be suffering from COVID, and nobody knows about them because they are nobody in society. So, the problem is that the thing spreads and you don't see it. It comes to you, you don't see it. So it's a very sad affair. When we received donations from Jack Ma, we received, we even borrowed, we borrowed some money from institutions, but we were not borrowing the money to spend on Kenyans. We were borrowing money because the COVID moment was a profit-making moment. We had the COVID billionaires, and we all saw who they were, but nothing has happened to them. It's water under the bridge. To a second parliament, we've got the most useless parliament this season, sadly enough, because they would have actually told Kenyans what they did with the people who actually mismanaged the COVID funds, but nothing. We've all forgotten about it. We are now dealing with the BBI process. Counties as well are not guilty. Counties received money for COVID, and some counties have not spent it for some reasons. Some counties when you hear from the people in the ground, they say that they just gave themselves contracts, the who is who, they shared out the money. So the money was shared out. We have a problem as a country. It is true, BBI was trying to address ethics, ethos, national ethos. Well, we don't have a problem with ethos, but we have a problem with the leaders with no ethos. Yeah, because if you're seeing people dying and all you can think of is making money for yourself and your wife and your family, then you have a problem. You're not supposed to be in leadership. So sadly enough, right from the top, from the president all the way to the bottom, we are all guilty for what is going to happen now. As Kenyans die, we should be asking ourselves, do we have the people in government? I listened to Dr. Mwachonda Chibanzi, yeah, on, I think it was Citizen TV. He was talking about the doctor strike. And the way he talks about what was going on in hospitals. Doctors are meeting patients, they've got no protective gear, and if a doctor dies, nobody cares, the government doesn't care. But you see, when one MP died, they now want an helicopter to evacuate them, from COVID. Now, we have a problem. Doctors should, I think they should, the way we take care of the military when there is war between us and Somalia is the way we're supposed to take care of the doctors. And I'm actually calling on all the Kenyans, if the national government does nothing to help the doctors, we can do a fundraising. Kenya for Kenyans. We fundraise and get the PPIs. We get all the people who can stitch masks to do that. We need to support the doctors, because if you are sick or somebody who's close to you is sick today, you're going to need that doctor. You go to the hospital and there's no doctor because he died or she died because of COVID. We don't have so many doctors in the country, and it's not hard for the president. You remember the time that the president said that I'm giving part of my salary off to support COVID? I wonder whether that happened. But we need to think of, okay, how can we transfer money? You had a very good question. Is there a way of transferring money from BBI to COVID management? There is a way. There is a way, of course. How did they find a way to pay for the old men who went discussing COVID, the BBI across the country? Wherever there's a political will, there is always a way. So it's something which is so serious that as Kenyans, we need to rise up and say, let's support the doctors. If the government is doing nothing, let's fundraise and support our doctors.
Slantoy, Wanjiro.
Okay. First of all, I agree with a lot of what Mutai said, except the part where he said we should fundraise, because we have been heavily taxed as Kenyans. This is what I think. I think we should normalize robbing these people. You see them in the supermarket, you wait for them to pay for their things and you rob them, because these people have stolen, they have looted, they have murdered, we should normalize robbing these people. When you rob them, go to their house, rob them. I am here for violence and chaos. Anyway, another thing that I want to say is that I think we should also be focusing a lot of our energy on talking about, even on an economic level. We should be having a conversation about people who've lost their jobs, people who've lost their businesses. What are we doing? Like that is a conversation we should be having. Where are the economists? What can they tell us about rebuilding this economy? We should also be having conversations with doctors. I don't know why we are not even developing a vaccine. We have Cambry, equipment being stolen. We have people with ventilators in their houses, and I see rob these people. Anyway, I'm very annoyed about the health situation in this country. I'm annoyed that doctors don't have personal protective gear. I am mad, and I do not want to hear Kenyans for Kenyans, because we did Kenyans for Kenyans the last time, and money was not accounted for. So I'm just wondering, if you have the money to pay for a chopper, you have the money to do Jerusalem a child. So anyway, my point is just to say, rob these people, rob all of them.
Lantoy.
I completely agree with Wanjiro about the fundraising issue. Like, I think it's what the issues that David you raised are very important. We just differ on the fundraising issue, and the reason why I differ with the fundraising thing is, I think we've always found our way to substitute government when government should be doing their business. So like we've always been, we are called resilient people. We've every time there's something wrong, we help ourselves. But like honestly, it's a bit unfair. Like, at what point are these people supposed to? There's a global pandemic, for crying out loud. At what point are they supposed to help us? So if there's hunger, they didn't prepare for that, we come and help people. There's floods, they didn't prepare for that, we come. Then a global pandemic as well. As in, what is the government for if it doesn't help us during these situations? So I think probably it would be useful to find out, um, because you see, even when we're talking about funding for BBI, up to now there's no official like paper track on how much has been spent on the proceedings of BBI. Like, who even approves these budgets? At what point are they, given out? So even when we're talking about, rerouting those funds towards COVID, like where do we even go? Who do we even ask? So that would be like a point of interest to just find out. So who exactly do we ask about this? But yeah, like I think we shouldn't normalize, and probably it's like I think it's an African thing. It's not, I don't think it's I think it's a societal thing. Like, we've grown up knowing, if there's something wrong, we help, we do, we give of ourselves. And probably that's just how government works also, in a sense that it's like, I mean, they're gonna do it anyway. Like, let's just chill. They're gonna fundraise. They're going to help other people. So probably they've gotten used to that, and that's a culture that probably they should have put in the national ethos as, a thing to be changed, so that people stop doing government's work. Yeah, we shouldn't be doing government's work. We pay taxes. People are in like serious economic holes right now. They're not able to make ends meet, and then now we start fundraising. So it's a bit of a challenge thing.
Thank you. Okay. Let me chip into this as well. Anyway, you see, did you see? There's a time when there was a lot of clamor for the wheelbarrow and the Mama Boga and all that. The leaders got panic and said, we cannot afford a class war, because if the poor actually become enlightened and realize that we've been messing up with them for all these years, they're going to be very, very angry, and they'll come after us. They're going to rob us, like Wanjiru was saying. So Wanjiru is actually not saying it, encouraging them. Nature takes its course. As I said, the arc of the moral universe is curved but bends towards justice. Justice will happen. I normally give examples of our country. Allow me to say this. It will help all of us. In my country, Kenya, we have the gap between the rich and the poor is so wide, and then the walls between the poor and the rich also so high. We shut the door. Even when you're driving around town, you find a beggar, you want to close your window. We shun away. We think that poverty is that. We never think of poverty as something that we need to heal. And trust me, Kenya has enough money for everybody. We have enough for everybody, but not enough for everybody's greed, as they say. We got enough. So you normally have somebody with a big house somewhere in some posh corner of Nairobi, and then they have a maid and a watchman who lives in the poorest slum in the country. They come to the house, they see you've got 10 cars there, you've got all the money in the world, you clean your house, you go back to your small house in the slums, and you've got a baby who is dying, sick, and your wife tells you, look here, the baby's going to die, they've got 3, 4 cars. Go and take one, sell it, we heal our baby, So that would be a crime, but then for a reason of saving life, So we have put ourselves in that position. Let me give an example now. A country like most of the European countries, the houses have got no walls, guys. No walls. There's no wall between one house to the other. The windows are there, no grills in the windows. Nobody will come and steal from you because everybody has a TV, everybody has a fridge, everybody has all those equipment that you'd imagine you'll need in a house to survive. So the gap between the rich and the poor is so small, and there are no walls. That is a balanced society. The day you'll see Kenya having less of walls and grills on windows, that's when you'll know that we are now an equal country. So long as you're still having 10 cars, you only drive one, you've got 10 houses, you only sleep in one and one bed. The moment we change from that to having a system whereby we feel sad when we see somebody without a TV, we feel sad when we see somebody who cannot afford to take a child to school. When we get to that level, that is when you know that we have changed as a country. But so long as we still have the glorification of wealth, we have a problem. Leaders are leading us the wrong way by having too much salaries. The issue of salaries as well, is going to be a problem. We need to find a way of equalizing the country. So the conversation moving forward is, how do we equalize Kenya? Okay?
Yeah.
And we can only equalize Kenya if everybody has an equal voice. Like the way we are speaking, we are having a conversation here. But currently we have a system in the country whereby a few people have a voice, the rest of us have got no voices. And those are the people who Wanjiru was saying are going to rise up and start robbing because they want justice and equality.
Yeah, I thank you guys. I want to go to some of the comments, and there's the request to post the speech on Yashpal Guy's speech on Singi Facebook. I will consult with the necessary people and find out if that's possible. Then my favorite Canon Francis Omondi is asking, who are these people we are talking about? And who are the people the Constitution talks about? There's Mwenyenchi, Wenyenchi, Watu, the Watus, there's the different understanding of who people are. Then there was a question from Curtis Reed about, and so Silanto, you can take the question about the people. Who are the people? Mutai, you can answer, how does the proposed changes in government structure speaks to any of the 9 core concerns? Then Alaman James says the document is both original and interesting. Unfortunately, the interesting parts are not original and the original parts are not interesting. Then Gathua says, true, nobody complains about the winner takes it all. Love that point. Charles Minor affirms a conversation we are having, that wrong questions plus wrong processes equals wrong answers. Then there's no money from NHIF to cover COVID cases, but there's no cash. There's cash for BBI. Wanjiru, maybe you can talk about how insurance is not able to cater even for it's. I saw figures of 50,000 a day for it. Yeah. So if I am fundraising for a social cause, why am I paying tax? Then Gadwa Mungai says, poverty is not created by the poor people, it is imposed by the system that we created. So, Wanjiru, will you go first? And then Mutai, and then Silantoy.
Okay, yes, I had heard about NHIF not catering to COVID patients, and yet, when your salary is paid, NHIF is something that you must pay. So now when NHIF comes and says we are not paying, so what is the point of even taking that policy in the first place? Number 2, and I think I should have started with this, I support the doctors' strike. If the doctors do decide to strike, if they don't come to an agreement, I 100% support the doctors' strike, and I'm saying that we are COVID CBBI. So healthcare must work for Kenyans. We must find a way to make sure that public healthcare works for Kenyans. We should be having conversations about healthcare. We should be talking like the people we should be seeing on the news should be doctors and economists trying to figure out how do we get our health together and how do we get our economy together. That is what should be circulating our news. It was very unfortunate to hear that NHIF will not cover. It was also interesting to hear that some private insurers are not going to cover for the COVID, and it just, so what is the point? If you cannot come to me Like the reason I'm saving the money is so that I don't need to panic when, when there's a need for me to use that money. And then now there's a need, and then you're telling me, oh yeah, by the way, I'm sorry, we can't help you. Someone needs to really come correct with Kenyans. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's come correct with Kenyans. Mutai.
Thank you very much. I like that. Let's come correct to Kenyans. I like what you've said before as well, that BBI had questions and they've given the wrong answers to it. Yeah. When the BBI, we've actually understood why there are wrong questions and wrong answers. When the task force went out collecting contributions from the public, we've just learned that what was given by the public and what we have right now as what we call the BBI do not match, because apparently the BBI was doctored somewhere in between. I guess that one answers the question. Why is it that BBI is so disjointed? From what it says, the concerns were from ethos all the way, the 9 points, and the answer they've given, why are they not connected? It's because BBI was doctored. That answers that. Now, the other structural issues that I'll touch on today, let me start with the MPs, the assembly. The BBI has suggested that in some constituencies, they'll have 2 or 3 MPs. In some, they will have 1. Now, that is something very confusing. That is why we say that BBI was poorly structured, not very thought through, because now 3 MPs in one constituency. There's one CDF port, kitty. Now, the question was, who manages the kitty? Will one of the 3 MPs become the chair, the other one secretary, the other one treasurer? Who manages the kitty? The original plan from the BBI, from what we've read in the news, is that it was supposed to be 1 kitty for the 3 MPs. But now the MPs, when they went to Naivasha with the president the other day, they came out after they've agreed that every MP will have their own their own CDF kitty. How expensive will that be? Are you seeing that? So that is one structural problem with the BBI. All of a sudden, they've increased the burdens to the wage bill. More money is going to be allocated to the BBI in line with the number of MPs that are going to be added onto the BBI. That's one. So note that, and I would like everybody to go back and look at the BBI document and look at the issue of some constituencies having more than 1 MP, and the fact now that each MP will have his own or her own CDF kitty. That's a lot of money. The other issue is the issue of the Senate. So the Senate is currently semi-upper house. There's a big fight between the Parliament and the National Assembly and the Senate. But naturally, world over, as I said again, in a democracy, let's not reinvent the wheel. It's been tried and tested across the world. Senate is the upper house. And so far, many of us will agree, so far, Senate is doing a better job than the National Assembly that has become, sadly enough, part of the executive. They are the attack dogs of the executive. They'll approve anything the executive says. So what we are seeing now as being pro-people is the Senate. So we love the Senate. And we want the Senate to be the upper house because they will speak our language. The issue of gender. They've restructured gender by bringing women from the parliament. You see, they've put money into parliament. They've given all new MPs a CDF kitty. The women reps in parliament had their fund as well for their own functions in the counties. But now they are pulling them out of parliament where the money is. And they are taking them to the Senate. And what have they done to the Senate? They've pushed it down to be a lower house. So if this new BBI was actually pro the female gender, why have they done this? Why are they taking women out of parliament and then they're pushing them to Senate and they're suppressing the Senate? Because the moment you suppress the Senate, you're also suppressing the counties because every senator has a representative vote of the entire county. So the 47 senators represent the counties. Their vote is not their personal vote, it's a vote on behalf of the county. So it shows that BBI does not respect the counties by disrespecting the Senate. That's a problem we must look into. Now, the big boy now in the room is the issue of the prime minister, the president, the so many deputies. it does not make sense. You have a president who appoints the prime minister and can fire the prime minister. That is a bit worrying. That's a bit worrying. And I think that is something that we need to think. Let's put everybody, because we've realized that the BBI structure as it is now was made with specific people in mind. So they said the current deputy president, because we don't like him, let him be a vice president with no powers. They're forgetting that different people will take up these offices. Okay, you've got the seat of the president. One of the handshake partners, each of them is pushing, saying, it's going to be me, and that's it. It's going to be me, and that's it. That is not how to make a constitution. They normally say, make it as if your worst enemy is going to be sitting on that seat. Yeah. So they need to think of the Idi Amin. They need to think of actually Idi Amin being the president of Kenya and see how he can manage the country. And do you have checks and balances? Suppose he goes crazy, and with the power that he's been given, will there be a way of checking and balancing him? Yes or no? The last one is the issue of the youth. The youth have been told, boys and girls, we're going to give you a commission where you can sit in one little room and make up and contribute to the country. It's going to have about, is it 7 or 8 people? So whatever number it is, it's going to be a very small team. But then again, that does not address the issue of the youth. I was saying in another forum in Siasa Place that what the youth should be looking at is money in the pocket. Give us something in BBI that will put money in our pocket. Tell us, for example, that 5% of the budget in both levels of government would be put aside for the youth to be borrowed as capitation for their business. So anyway, so that is the last structure which I thought of addressing. So the MPs, the Senate, the gender, the prime minister position, and the bigger BBI structure, and then the issue of the youth. Those are issues which I think if everybody else in Kenya looks into, you'll realize that we have a problem with BBI.
Oh, thank you. So I think I want to ask another question about, as we're going, what's good about BBI? Maybe we'll come back to that. Slanto, you had a question to answer. Do you remember?
Yes,
Yeah.
I was going to talk about the issue of the people and who is mwenye nchi and mwananchi. It's definitely a difficult time to be having this conversation, obviously in the midst of a global pandemic, with all the economic issues that we're having, all the health issues that we're having. But I honestly see this BBI conversation as an opportunity for education, and an opportunity for clear insight concerning political choices that have nothing to do with us and that are not beneficial for us. So, and in a very, objective way, where it's, unfortunately, a lot of political conversation is very polarized, but I think this is one of the ways, this is one of the times where we can actually choose to have a political conversation that does not have to be in a polarized manner. And therefore, in doing this, like, we can actually grasp that opportunity to be wenye nchi for once in our lives. And so I see this as an opportunity definitely for education, and also just as an opportunity to think about, okay, yes, the first draft of the BBI raised specific issues that we have as a country. Granted, those could be real issues, probably because I guess they're trying to make us think about solutions. So maybe this could be the time to really critically look into what solutions could be useful for us. And I think the challenge is the timing. Like, the timing is really crazy. But in my opinion, if we are really looking to deal with the issues that we have, how about, my suggestion would be, okay, so you have a bunch of legislative amendments that you would like. How about you start with those? Start by tabling these things in Parliament, to show some sort of commitment towards actually dealing with issues. How about besides, before we go into a constitutional amendment, first make headway with all these legislative amendments that you would like, put them before Parliament, let us see them working, and then probably by 2022 you can present these other things to us in a referendum. But for now, like, it would just be useful to show, okay, this is out of goodwill. If it's sincerely out of goodwill, put those things before Parliament first, the ones that are all legislative amendments. And then let's talk about the constitutional amendment later. If we must, let's talk about it after we're done with the pandemic. So I think that's probably, and one way we can do that is to hold our members of Parliament accountable. So it's for me to reach out to my member of Parliament of Westlands and let him know that, listen, I'm interested in this particular bill. If it would be in your best interest to put this before Parliament rather than giving me a whole referendum story, So I think it's up to us now to find out, okay, so who is my MP? How can I reach out to him? What a legislative amendment am I interested in? How can I have that be placed before Parliament? And then from there, we okay, after that, we can discuss this whole constitution thing, but let's start with these other amendments before.
Yeah. And thank you, Silantwe, for that. And also, I think to add on it, that there's so many other commissions that have come up with, there's the Ndungu Land Report, that was the Truth and Justice Reconciliation Conversation that was never opened. The Ndungu Land Report was never opened. I keep asking myself, what is the urgency with the BBI that has to be done, that the Ndungu, the Waki Commission, all those commissions that have been commissioned. We really love commissions. All of those that we have commissioned, we've not implemented any of the recommendations. So that could be a question we front to government. I'm aware that time is so much gone, but there is a few pertinent questions that we have not covered. So we'll try and speed converse through them if we can. And what I will do is I will give each of us a question to answer that we'd already talked about. Wanjiro, when I listened to you because I listened to the Siasa Place conversation you and David had, there was the conversation around youth and the BBI, and you talked really eloquently about the position that there are already the National Youth Council, there's already other provisions to deal with the youth. And then there's other, like the carrot that's being dangled of grace period before you pay your loan. And for me, if you gave me a loan for business and then you told me that I will give you 7 years so that you get time to pay it, so that you get time to pay, I would just basically know that you think my idea is bad, you think my business will not do well. So, because why are you giving me 7 years if you've not prepared, if you know the environment is not conducive for business? So government knows that there's no jobs. It basically is saying it will take you 7 years from when you graduate to actually be able to pay this. I feel like wanajishtaki but this is the carrot. This is the carrot. I don't know what the carrot is for women. So Wanjiro, tell me what you think about that.
You know, it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because today we were having a conversation with a friend of mine about taxation and how KRA is really coming for people. And so allowing you to pay your help loan after 7 years, it reminds me of these movies. You know, these movies you watch, and then there's a kidnapper, and the kidnapper has kidnapped people, and then the kidnapper, you know, like there's a kidnapper and there's a leader. So the kidnapper has kidnapped people, you have been beaten, you have been gagged with towels and water and everything. And then now the major person comes in and said, oh, they have done this to you. Here, just have a cup of water, have some coffee. You don't even have a blanket. Oh, wow, let me give you a blanket. They've not set you free. They have not, you know, rescued you from the kidnappers. They are just, you know, they're just giving you time so that you can recover, so that they can continue to punish you and they can continue to torture you. I think that is what this BBI is doing. Like you're telling people we will give you a tax break, but then you're not dealing with the thing that is causing people to pay high taxes. You're not giving people public services, and you're not making education affordable for, affordable for people. If you make education affordable, we will not need that many loans. So we will not even need the 7 years to pay for these loans. If you make it easy for businesses, then we will not even need a tax break, because we will be seeing where the tax is going. If we can see where the money that we've been paying for tax is going, then we will not need all these things, oh, tax break, oh, vacation, oh, CG, what, just kill us. Stop trying to gag us and punish us, and then you give us coffee and donuts, and then you go back and beat us. Leave us alone. Just provide the services, or tell us mumeshindwa, and then, you know, for those of us without huduma number, deport us to whatever countries you're deporting us to, because we have refused to, you know, to comply with these lies and this, you know, and these small things that you're giving us. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. And to understand, I keep wondering, how do we make this conversation? I wonder if the young people are seeing it that way. How do we do it so that people see it in that sense? And maybe they are. I hear on the ground, I see that the conversation is really 50-50, and I am grateful for that it is not a direct yes, we will pass, which I am happy about. David, I want to talk to you about the wage bill. There is World Development Funds, there are salaries, there's that 60 plus 35% you asked. I always say, Aki, I think Kenya has money. You know how parents, they always have a secret, we call it the bra account. Your mom goes into they goes somewhere. I definitely believe that Kenya has a bra account, because where is all this money coming? There's the 60% recurrent expenditure on salaries. There's the 35%. There is money for coffee, for teas, for like there's government functions can't just be for, they need to be very elaborate. Where are we getting this money from? And I saw in the news the other day that maybe in 5 years' time, we will not be able to pay madeni za China. What are we doing? Wherever this government is finding all this money from, can we also get it? So wage bill, what are we doing with the wage bill?
Thank you very much for that. I've been waiting for that question, because the biggest problem we have in the country is the issue of how we manage our wage bill, how we manage our finances generally. Yeah. And we normally see, for example, you're right. You know, you normally see the way the president, for example, has got a motorcade from sunrise to sunset. The way they use helicopters, you know, like birds in the sky. So there seems to be money in the country, but where is this money coming from? And how are we managing it? Yeah, I think the problem is, I'll give an example. I've seen a few friends, relatives, and neighbors who, when they know that they are going to inherit a lot of land, they start spending. Yeah, they start borrowing and say, "Oh, don't worry, I've got land, I'll sell, and we'll sort you out." So they start spending what they don't have. Okay, I think we had a problem when we discovered oil in Turkana. This is just a thought, my own theory. This we saw ourselves as an oil producing country. Yeah, and we started saying, okay, fine, we've got oil, we could borrow. So we went beyond the caution. We used to be very cautious. During the Kibaki time, we were very cautious in how much we borrowed. But now we realize we've got Turkana oil, we are fine. We're going to be rich. Our father has got land, we're going to inherit. So let's start spending. We started spending, we started borrowing. And then we went away from the lenders used to be telling us, guys, you are overspending, you are over borrowing. That was European countries and the Americans. And then we went to China. So China have got their own agenda. They are on an expansionism agenda. They are the next superpower. That's what they believe. And they want to conquer Africa, take over Africa. The best way to take over somebody is start lending them money. Then you tell them, okay, fine, don't worry, don't pay me. We can solve this thing in kind. There's something I want from you. So whatever China wants from Africa, they really are going through it very aggressively. So we've borrowed a lot from them. And I don't know, when they come for their money, I don't know what we're going to do. Are we going to give them our land? What are we going to do? So we are living on borrowed money. That's the simple answer. We are living on borrowed money. And we've done a simple mathematics right now with Wanjiru and Silantoi to say that if we are paying 60% to salaries, and we are even imagining giving counties 35%, we'll be left with 5% only. So how are we going to manage the sunset to sunrise motorcade? How are we going to manage the helicopters in the sky? Where is the money coming from? It's what we borrow, is our borrowing. And that is why I said we should have thought as a country, as we have this open discussion about restructuring government, how we can restructure our finances. BBI should actually be talking about how we manage our money. Yeah, how we need to have, see, our national debt is growing, but we don't have a stringent measure of actually controlling it. Suppose we have we have a president who feels that I'm going to be there for only 5 years. Let me just borrow. And the good thing is you borrow and you don't pay back, because the guy who's going to pay back is always coming after you 10 years after. That is a problem with government money. We spend, we borrow, because we won't suffer the problem. The problem is going to be you, Wanjiru, when you want to be the president of Kenya, or Silantoi, is going to be us in future. So because we are now the ones to suffer, we need to be now questioning why it is not right, why we should not actually request that let us have a conversation on how we manage borrowing in the country. Let me just mention something which I was supposed to say before. It was on the timing that Silantoi said. Timing, is it the best time now to be having the conversation we are having on BBI? The simple answer is we could actually have the conversation minus the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill 2020. So some parts of BBI are good. We need to just pull out that one bill, because BBI is a series of bills, yeah, which are to be passed through Parliament. We just delete one, which changes the Constitution. And then now we will see whether these people really care for the youth, for the women, and for all what they've been saying. If we remove that one act, which is going to be passed, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill, out of that Bible of BBI, we may see something positive happening. Then we can say timing is not right. Let's wait until maybe after elections, and we deal with that issue of changing the Constitution. After we've done public participation, we've done proper engagement and interaction with the new changes, and then so that every Kenyan can actually say that I was part of changing the Constitution.
I thank you for that. I loved what Silantoi was speaking about when she said that let's first do the legislative changes first, and then the constitutional amendments can come later. So if I really loved that explanation. Silantoi, I'm not sure if you're able to hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes. I had lost you guys for a bit, but I'm back.
All right, Karibu back. So
Okay.
have you been able to listen in to some of these conversations that we've had? Do you have any comments? Because the last question that I'd like all of us to tackle is about the role of the church in the BBI. Msingi is about connecting the worlds of faith, social justice, advocacy, and activism. And there's already division within the church in terms of BBI. So there's some who are pro, some who are not. The ones who ain't about it, we are wondering, is it because the people who are anti the BBI process support churches? The ones who are like, it's all a mess. What would you tell? What would you say is the role of the Kenyan church in this in the BBI process? Slantoi, first, you can answer, you can add to any of what the David and Wanjiru are saying, then you can answer about the role of the church.
Yeah, I think I got the conversation towards the very tail end of when David was talking about timing. As I wouldn't add on to that. I think you guys covered it appropriately. In terms of the church, I think I'll say maybe religious institutions in general. I think religious institutions have a lot of power and they have a lot of influence. And in terms of this conversation about BBI, I think these institutions need to be proactive in educating their following, their masses. In the sense, like, if I'll try and think of it as if I was a leader of a church, what would I do for my congregation? I would try to find people who will talk, like experts, to speak about it in the congregations, make sure people are more educated about what the BBI entails, and then act as a sound institution that will question and query on behalf of its masses. The thing about these amendments that are being proposed, I'm very happy that they have no quote unquote moral implication. In a sense, you know, the major issues that religious institutions would have, for example, like abortion or gay rights, or, you know, these amendments don't have any moral implications per se. And so it really gives the church and other religious institutions a premise to actually discuss things that are not necessarily dictated by the Bible or the Quran or any other religious book. And therefore it just ends up being what is on the document and how is it useful, rather than would Jesus do this or not, which is also important. I mean, for the religious institutions to not go against their morals, but it's just good that this is a conversation that does not concern that, and it can actually be a sound debate without seeming to be immoral or sinful per se. So I think this is a chance for religious institutions to take up an objective role in the conversations that will go around the BBI and just help educate their masses to make informed decisions. I think that's the role religious institutions can play.
Thank you, Slantoi. Mutai?
I want to say thank you to the churches to start with. I was beginning to get worried, you know, that they were a bit quiet when things were going so wrong. And I've actually seen two groups of Kenyans who've actually come up to speak about the BBI challenges. It is the youth and the church. The youth and the church have actually done a lot in actually trying to ask questions about what's going on. What the church have said, I agree with what you said, that the issue of the moral issues are not actually in question in the BBI. Yeah, the issues that normally we would associate with the church. The church have just come up and said, you guys, if you are uniting two people and ignoring the rest of the country, then that is not unity. Let's have a way of uniting the country. Let's have a genuine unity of purpose, because we cannot be saying one thing and actually acting the other way. And I think the church have actually seen what will happen if BBI passes. They've seen what will happen if we go to the referendum. I saw a video in some group, some videos shared. Somebody was banning a BBI flyer and saying, now this is how all you BBI supporting people are going to go. So see, that is already, that was very scary. Because if that was a Mwananchi, the people in the street, if that is what they are thinking, if the street is talking in that language, that the way this paper is banning is the way everything else is going to go, then we have a problem. The document is no longer building bridges, it's actually destroying the country. So the church have actually woken up and said, if we don't say something now, we're going to regret in future, because when the spark is lit, there's no turning back. And I've been trying to think of, you put this BBI into perspective. Pick on any leader and put him into the position of the president. Do it as a game. Put Raila as president and imagine what will happen now cascading down. You'll have a problem. Put Uhuru Kenyatta as president, because he'll have another many years to go now, because the new constitution will mean that he can vie to be president again. Think of him as president again. Think of the problems the country will go through. Starting with the people who are pro-BBI right now, those who are in the forefront, they will say no to Mendanganywa, because they know that this BBI is for Raila to be president. Suppose he doesn't become president, it will be war, another war. Then we go for another constitutional change again. Put anybody else in that position. Think of any leader in the country now, put them in that seat of power. You will have problems in the country. That is what the church has seen. And I appreciate the church, the fact that they've come up, they've voiced their concern. And evidence of the effect of what they did was that today there was no signature collection. The church actually had an impact. They said stop, and actually it stopped. So we are happy that there's some voice from the peaceful people, and they want the country to have peace. So my challenge to everybody now is that do what the church has done, put any leader now into that position of power of the president and see what the country will be like. And also imagine, so it brings the question now, do we think that office is good as it is with all that power? Or do you think the office actually should be made less powerful? The answer should be less powerful, so that whoever goes in that seat, we don't care what happens.
Thank you, Mutai. Wanjiro?
Oh, okay. I think in the last conversation that we had, I don't know if it was Dr. Wandia or it was you, Carol, who said that God speaks people fluently, right? So if we're going to talk about the church and we're going to talk about the role of the church, and if the church really represents the people, then they will speak what the people are speaking. Because if God speaks if God speaks people fluently, then the church must also do the same thing. What do the people need? What about our laws says that we care about the people? What about the constitution says that we care about the people? What about the BBI says that we care about the people? And by BBI, we're not just talking about the actual contents of the BBI, we're also talking about the timing of the BBI. We're also talking about what will the people get from the BBI, what will the people give so that we can have the BBI operationalized. And if the church is saying one thing and the people are feeling another thing, if the people are oppressed and the church cannot see the oppression of the people, if the people are suffering and dying and jobless and the church cannot see that and speak to that, then I don't know I don't know whether it is Baal or whether it is witchcraft or sorcery or whatever, but it needs to speak the language of the people. And I like so far that they have said that the BBI is not something that they support, and I like that they've done that. And I think I like it because we're on the same page, because I also don't support the BBI. But I think it's important that the church stands for the oppressed and the church does not comfort the oppressor. Because now when they start to comfort the oppressor, then they're not speaking the language of God. And if you're not speaking the language of God, I don't know what you're practicing. So yes, so the role of the church is to always focus on the people. What says we care about the people? What says we love the people? What institutions are really there for the people and not there for specific people who want certain things and who want certain offices? Yes. So the role of the church is to make sure that, we are focused on the oppressed. We are focused on the people as envisioned in Article 1. Is power still with the people? Because that is where God is. Yeah.
Thank you. And yes, man, there's so much that I have been to school today. I've been to constitutional school, I've been to law school, I've been to all kind of school. But I think we've broken the record for Msingi Talks. We really, in terms of time, we have gone way over time. But I want to say this publicly and on record. I am really grateful to you guys for sitting with the topic and helping us thrash it, and really hopefully not leaving any stone unturned. And if there's a stone that you wanted to unturn that has not been unturned, this is your chance, because I'd like you to give your closing remarks. I'd also like you to say where you can be found on the social media streets, and how easy it is to get access to you. So we'll start with Silantoi.
I think for me, it's just to say thank you for inviting me to this platform. Like, I've also really learned a lot from all of you. It's been very insightful just to hear your views and, your perspectives and history, and just the wealth of knowledge that you brought has been really like very interesting to me. And yeah, I'm just, I don't know, this BBI thing, it keeps coming up in my mind as a moment that it's very bad timing, but it's a good thing to embrace in terms of learning how government works, why it works the way it does, and what we can do about it. So I think this is a good chance for us, including myself, to just understand more about government, and then figure out, how we can contribute meaningfully towards the governance of the country. And yeah, so I think that's my parting shot, just to find a way to meaningfully contribute towards making our own country better. And you can find me on, hey, which social media do you want to find me on? You can find me on Twitter at Silantoi Suzanne. You can find me on Instagram at Silantoi_S. And you can find me on Facebook at Lengawa Silantoi Suzanne. Yeah, and also you can check out my YouTube channel,
Yes.
known as Is That So with Silantoi, and it's a podcast as well. So yeah, thanks. It's been really nice being here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Karibu tena Silantoi. Mutai.
Yeah, I want to say I've really enjoyed the interactions we've had with everybody, with you, Carol, Wanjiro, Suzanne, and Manko's also doing very well. And there's something that she's typed from somebody called Gatua Muigai, who said, poverty is not created by the poor people. It is imposed by the system we created. So poverty is created by government. I think that's a very strong point to take home. And also, you see, if we're in a COVID moment, I think it's good if I end by talking about COVID. And we know that it's something that is going to really affect the country so much. And I guess it's upon all of us now not to fundraise. I withdraw the fundraising, finally. But it was actually to fundraise to shame these people. But I think we are not going to shame them by removing coins from our pockets, but we are going to shame them by forcing them to remove coins or notes from their pockets. It's about time that we call upon them to actually focus on nothing but COVID, because it affects everybody. It affected the president of the US, it affected the prime minister in the UK, and nobody can say that they cannot be affected by COVID. So it's good that leaders right now show their real concern for the public by putting all money, all thoughts, all resources towards COVID. The church as well, Karen, because you've said this is a message to the church as well. It's good that they also have a message to the leaders that let's focus from changing the law, totally changing the way we are going to treat the people who are being affected by COVID. And you can find me, this is David. You can find me on David1 Mutai. So David, then the number 1 Mutai at Twitter. I normally use Twitter more than anything else. So you'll find me in Twitter. And I'm sorry, I'm very anti-BBI, so don't feel offended. Nothing personal. I just love Kenya too much to let it go down BBI.
Asante Mutai. Wanjiru.
All right, just for the record, I am also against the BBI. I am suggesting we ban it, and the ashes can be thrown in a pit latrine and forever. Let's focus on the Constitution. That is my stand. I'm not on the fence on anything. Like, ban this thing. And in the event that we happen to be on the same page with a politician, like the deputy president, just because we're on the same page, it does not mean that we are together. Right? Once we're done with the BBI, we are coming to also deal with you as well. Let's not get confused. But anyway, I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much. I have learned a lot. Thank you, Carol, for inviting me. Thank you, David and Susan, for your perspective. It was really amazing. Thank you. You can find me on Twitter on at I am underscore Wanjiru, or if you just type Wanjiru Nguhe, you will find me. And you will also find me on Facebook on Wanjiru Nguhe. If you just type Wanjiru Nguhe, then you will find me there. Thank you so much. And let's reject this BBI. And if we cannot reject it, I want us to normalize robbing these people. Listen, me, I'm here for chaos because we have been shown chaos and dust by these people. So ban this BBI, rob these people. Yes, that is it. If I talk too much, I might be arrested. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanjiru. And for me, as parting shot, is to say, really, in matters of justice, as a church, as Christians, we cannot, and I'm talking to Christians and to people who profess the faith, is that we cannot not take sides. There are people, justice is not, there is only one side to justice, and God always sides with justice. And so wherever there is injustice and you're not dealing with it, you're siding with the oppressor and you're siding with the perpetrator. And that their system, that sin is not only personal, and there's also systematic sin, and in terms of systems that are sinful. And so if you're going to add to systems that oppress, those are systems that are not of God, and they are not for God. And so till next time, let's continue to do justice. Kwaherini, Facebook family. Please share this message to anybody and everybody who you feel needs to listen to it.